Joe Osceola, present.
That ain't good. Joanne Sheehan, present.
Thank you, Sharon.
Sharon Stout, present.
Thank you, Sharon. Jackie.
Jackie Long, present.
Meredith.
Meredith Henderson, present.
Nancy.
Nancy Scott, present.
Terry.
Terry Russell, present.
And Tina Hayes, present. Thank you very much. Full house. And we're going to move to our student representative, Ms. Amy Hinesley.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, beautiful.
Okay, awesome. Good evening everyone, thank you so much for having me virtually tonight. And thank you again to Dr. Parker and everyone for the award last night. I can't thank you guys enough. So now for an update. Theater students are working virtually in person to create a synchronous production of Alice in Wonderland to be performed on March 18th, 19th, and 20th. Some of the vocal pieces are being composed by junior Phoebe Gill. On January 30th, Monomoy senior government students participated in the state We the People speech competition on the Constitution, government, and current events via Zoom. 9 seniors presented their arguments to the judges, and one, Andrew Davitt, won an award in civic learning. Both Key Club and Interact created Valentine's cards that were distributed to senior citizens around Valentine's Day. An additional Valentine's tree was spread within our school by Interact, who sold carnations, and Student Council, who sold candy cane hearts. The January Scholar Athletes of the Month were senior Maggie Dever and junior Dan Gould. And February Rotary Student of the Month was senior Jasmine Silva. You may have seen the Black History Month display outside the library, which I encourage you to also look through. The student creation presents a timeline of many important events in Black history and highlights historical icons. Additionally, Miss Weeks and Jasmine Jones put together a beautiful tribute to African American voices and their contributions to the music industry of the past and present, and this can be found at the top of the main staircase. 4 high school students participated in the Through Young Eyes, an exhibition of work by Cape Cod students at the Cape and Islands Art Educators Association. Additionally, the Cape and Islands Workforce Board and Mr. Alexander have worked to organize an internship program for MRHS seniors. Through the educational program, students are able to work in any of the 4 Monomoy buildings as teachers, assistants, lunch monitors, tutors, and more. Speaking from personal experience, I can say that myself and other students are having a blast with the kids and appreciate the experience to be able to intern during COVID. National Honor Society closed the first semester with significant work done on our chapter service project with schools, senior citizens' homes, and other organizations. Winter sports are coming to a close as the COVID special Fall 2 season begins. The hardworking seasons of boys and girls hockey and basketball led to many successes. Next up, we have football and cheerleading to look forward to. And that is all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much for having me again, and I look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you very much, Amy. Any comments, questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Amy. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes this evening. The first is the February 11th public budget hearing. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Nancy. Second?
Second.
Terry is seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will move to the Zoom room to vote for approval of the February 11th public budget hearing minutes, starting with Joe.
For the February 11th budget minutes, aye.
Thank you. Joanne?
Aye.
Thank you. Sharon?
Aye.
Thank you. Jackie?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's unanimous. The second set of minutes is the February 11th regular meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Nancy. Second?
Second.
Jackie seconded. Any discussion? All right, so we're going to move into the Zoom room to vote to approve February 11th regular meeting minutes. Joe?
Osceola, aye.
Thank you. Joanne?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Thank you. Jackie?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. That's unanimous. Now we move to public comment. Anyone in the public can speak up to 3 minutes. Additional time at the discretion of the chairperson. Do we have anyone from the public? All right, Charles, go ahead.
Thank you, Charles Busquets, 6 T-Berry Ave, Harwich. Very pleased to see on the agenda tonight a report comparing FY12 through FY22 assessments. And I'd like to make some comments on that in the budget, since I won't be able to comment again after public comment period tonight. Very pleased to see that. I think that's going to be a very important report to take forward to the communities. Very important report to take to the select board and officials in both towns. I did view the Harwich Selectmen's meeting this Monday, just read about it in the Chronicle a short while ago, and it's pretty clear that the Harwich Selectmen do not leave room for optimism of the proposed budget passing muster with them. And ordinarily, as a strong advocate in the community, I would be out taking issue with them over that and speaking for the importance of education. But I can understand when a budget that comes forward that's slightly less than 1% increase generates a 3% increase, over 3% increase in assessment for one town, and 3% decrease in the other town. I can see their concern. I can see their concern further when the report you'll look at later this evening. Appears to me from that report that the town of Chatham has saved multi-millions of dollars over the decade of regionalization if compared to if school costs had frozen with the FY12 pre-regionalization school year. On the other hand, town of Harwich has paid significant millions of dollars above that level. It's a little hard to judge because of the pre-regionalization versus regionalization figures are calculated a slightly different way. But one thing I do know is clear that since regionalization in FY13, if you just take a look at the combined assessments for FY13 and the combined assessments for proposed FY22, there is a difference of about $8.5 million increase from FY13 to FY22. Of that $8.5 million, about $500,000 is attributed to Chatham, and the other nearly $8 million goes to Harwich. And that's a breakout of 94% Harwich, 6% Chatham. I think that's very different than what the founders of the, as superintendent said so nicely, the framers of the original agreement had in mind if they could have projected down the road 10 years that the declining enrollment in Chatham would lead to this. So I can understand the position in Harwich. I think the figures are going to show that much more is needed than just the 1-year adjustment. Even if that adjustment is made in the alternative assessment, there's still going to be an over $600,000 shortfall in this budget.
Looks like we've lost sound. Charles, I don't know, are you on mute or is that on our end? I think it's frozen. Oh, you're frozen, okay.
There are unmet needs for next year that the budget can't meet specifically for Chatham Elementary School. And with the declining enrollment projections for Chatham, I can't see anything changing. And I can understand the position of people saying that the alternative assessment isn't a long-term fix, and there needs to be work begun on a long-term fix immediately because the funding formula in the original document, while it was agreed upon, made sense at the time, therefore is fair until it can be changed, really calls for a strong looking at. And I think the figures tonight that are going to be presented will make a strong case for people to better understand the disparities, financial disparities in regionalization over the decade. So I appreciate your full consideration and discussion on that when the time comes at the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Anybody else from the public who would like to speak? All right, seeing none, we're going to move into reports and discussions. And the first item is the Harwich Elementary School Library Project. I believe that's Mary Oldeck. welcome.
Thank you. Trying to get my colleague Sarah Eidman, trying to help her get her video going. She can hear us and she's part of the presentation, but if she can't get her camera on, she'll just be unmuting and speaking. Sarah is our librarian at Harwich Elementary School, and we've embarked on a very large-scale weeding project of our school library. And before you start to see the surplusing coming through, we felt it was very important that you understand the context for it and the need for it. So I just wanted to start by saying that you've heard the concept of windows and mirrors in children's literature or any literature, of the concept of providing windows into other people's experiences in the wider world, and mirrors that reflect your own experience and validate and provide you with a sense of your own culture. That was first coined in 1988 by a woman named Emily Stiles, and it was something that we were very in tune with when we were selecting the ELA curriculum, that the books that our children are reading in school are diverse, that they're accurate, that they lack stereotypes, are non-biased, that they're in good condition. And as we began to look at and analyze our library at Harwich Elementary School, we really have discovered that it probably has been, and I think this is probably the kindest estimate, at least 20 years since this collection has been looked at with the lens of age, condition, and bias. This is an example of one of the books that's on the surplus list tonight. This is called Your Skin and Mine, and it was published in 1965. Books like that, there's all over our library shelves, and they block the collection of the newest and most rich literature for our children. This really kind of came to a head in a little bit of a funny way. Over the school closure, we left on Friday, March 13th, thinking we would all be back on Monday, and we never came back. And we did collect in a bin outside of the school library books as the kids and families could bring them by. From that point forward, all through the summer, and we had a volunteer come in over the summer who reshelved all of those books, but she got to a point where she literally we just didn't have the shelf space for our collection. And at that time, we have about 28,000 items in a library for our student population. And Sarah's going to talk to you about the ratios and what's recommended. It became very clear that this was a long overdue project that we needed to do anyway. It's a matter of practice for librarians to keep the collection fresh, but also because of our focus on equity in our school district, and the fact that we just need to be sure that our children are being presented with the very best in the way of research materials, books, fiction, nonfiction. And Sarah's going to be talking about that process. I do just want to give a huge shark shout out, as we say in school, to Sarah. Sarah has been home since before Christmas on a leave with two very intensive foot surgeries, and she has taken on this project and has moved it forward all the while she's been out. We hope to have her back around St. Patrick's Day, but I can't thank her enough. The timing's perfect because the collection is not in circulation. We're not circulating library books this year, and we're really trying to take advantage of this time to get this big project done so that the library is fresh and reborn for the boys and girls when we return, hopefully to all in-person learning in the fall. So Sarah, would you like to talk to the school committee about your process?
Sure, thanks Mary. I'm so sorry that my camera's not working. I have no idea what's going on, but can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Good evening, Dr. Carpenter, school committee members, Monomoy teachers and staff, and community members. I just want to talk a little bit about what weeding is. It's an essential part of collection development, and it should be an ongoing process. It removes outdated, damaged, and biased books and materials from the library's collection. Bias in children's books has become an important discussion in library blogs and journals. Recent events in the news have brought this issue to the forefront. Do biased materials reinforce racism and stereotypes? I take this matter seriously and am involved in the Equity Task Force with Mark Smith and the Massachusetts School Library Association's Project Ready with Sarah Wheaton, the high school librarian, in order to work on these issues. Removing the old books allows room for the new. This is done carefully while taking into consideration what books and materials are still useful and salvageable. In December 2020, I analyzed our library's collection using the Follett Title-Wise analysis tool. And like Mary said, it found that there were over 28,000 items in the collection, and the average age was 1996. And I know this seems like the recent past, but it's 25 years ago. The analysis also showed there were 45.8 items per student, while the American Library Association recommends 15 to 20 books per student. The analysis highlighted aged and outdated materials in different areas of the library, and these outdated materials are my focus. Removing these old books allows students to notice the newer books on the shelf. Additionally, I will be purchasing books to update the collection, especially in areas that were heavily weeded. Every book removed from the shelf is opened and examined before it is weeded. Questions asked are, is this book really outdated? Is there anything redeeming about this book? Is the author significant? Can this book be saved? Should this book be replaced with a newer book on the same topic? Books removed from the shelf will be deleted from the collection and presented as surplus to you, the school committee. Weeding is important and necessary, and it improves the library collection. My plan is to work through the nonfiction areas first and then do the fiction areas. I have already deleted outdated materials, including videotapes and books on cassette. Weeding is an ongoing process. My goal is to finish reading the entire library collection by the end of the school year, I hope. And I also hope that once this initial giant weeding is finished, I can keep up with the process moving forward. I appreciate your support with this project and your ongoing support of the Harwich Elementary School Library. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much. Mary, are you going to have a closing statement?
Yes, thank you, Tina. I just wanted to thank Sarah for all of her work on this over these months that she's been at home. And I wanted to just talk about how we are backfilling and how we're paying for that. Every year, the library has a subscription to the Junior Library Guild, which is about $5,000, and that is a service that a lot of the school libraries subscribe to, where they send you books that would be an enhancement to your collection. Based upon the status of the library at the end of the summer, where we literally did not have enough room to put all the books back, we put that on hold, and we have, we're going to be able to purchase, it's coming in right around $6,000 worth of books. But as Sarah said, that still keeps us well beyond the recommended ratio of books per student. We also really enjoy a very nice relationship with the PTO, who, when we have book fairs, we couldn't have one this year, but when we do have book fairs, they donate the scholastic dollars to the library to help improve the collection as well. And I also just wanted to talk about staffing. even though Sarah's been out, we have had a long-term sub who's been, during the time that he would have a prep or that sort of thing, he has been helping with pulling the materials in the library and helping to get those organized, along with anytime we have an instructional assistant who has a spare moment, we ask them to help as well. Any questions?
Anybody questions, comments for Mary or Sarah?
No.
No one? So, Mary, I'm curious, how often, so it's the library project, but how often is this type of thing done in a library at all at a school?
As Sarah said, it should be an ongoing process. I spoke at length with the librarian at the Brooks Library, Anne, who's such a wonderful community partner with us, and she said she does it continually. Sarah, would you like to answer that as well?
Sure. I mean, it's something that should be ongoing. And if you keep up with it, you don't have to do the entire collection at the same time. There's certain parts of nonfiction, say, that have to be checked more regularly, like astronomy, or I think it's some of the life sciences and things like that, technology, because things get outdated and you don't want students having books in their hands that are no longer valid. So it's something that should be done as often as you get new books. You should be getting rid of old, outdated books. So I think that all the libraries in the Monomoy system do weed on a regular basis, but we wanted to talk to you about what we're doing just because of the volume that we're anticipating coming through as surplus, because it hasn't been done in 20 years. And some of the books that I'm pulling off are quite frightening because they're so old, outdated, or in such bad condition.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I was looking at this when the packet came out, VHS tapes. I was just looking at the number, and I was just curious at how often this is done. And yeah, I absolutely understand the sciences. I saw astrology books on there. How many were? I guess we'll look at this later on. But yeah, I found it fascinating. So thank you for your work. I really appreciate it. And yes, we definitely want to keep everything updated. Sharon, go ahead.
Yes, I'm really excited to hear about this. Normally, I don't like getting rid of things that I consider valuable, but in this particular case, I think that, as Sarah said, there are certain areas that in science that become outdated, but also that she's on the equity task force, and with that, we're looking at a lot of different curriculum for social science and other things. And so this, I think, is a great time to look at this. I also think that there are children, if they go in and they see so much stuff, it's so much harder to pick the good things out. So it does seem like a time for reading during this pandemic. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Terry, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm sure you've thought of this as I sit here, and it makes a whole lot of sense to me. But if there are that many books, minus the ones that are just dated, I'm referring to maybe classic books that are in decent conditions that you want to just make surplus. Would it be easier to have like a reverse book fair and give them away to the kids, those that want to take them home? I know when they come to us, it's just going to, either the business manager or somebody's going to have to figure out where do they go, or who would like them. I'm referring obviously to the ones that are decent to good, not the ones that are throwaways.
Well, I want to let you know that we're not getting rid of anything that's, say, a classic book that's still in good condition and it's a non-biased piece of fiction or nonfiction. We just wouldn't get rid of anything like that. I put it right back on the shelf if it's something that still has value or worth. I have a hard time getting rid of things. I'm like a perfect person to do this job because I don't want to get rid of books, but we do run out of space, and there are old books, outdated books, biased books in the collection that I don't want students to check out and leave the library with something that isn't the best book for them. So any book that is surplus really has to be thrown away. It doesn't belong in the hands of a student or in another collection. I can't imagine who would want them. They're pretty old, outdated, or falling apart, pretty much.
Thank you, Sarah. Anybody else? Joe, yes. Oh, yes, English teacher. Go ahead.
I don't speak tonight in that capacity. If I did, nothing would be thrown away. So I will not at all try to entertain that. Just a technical question. We're going to be voting on disposal of surplus materials. The first page lists the items that we are voting in favor of disposing. And then there are 3 pages of photographs of those items. The third page lists astrology books, but they're not included in the description of what we would be voting to dispose of. We do have astronomy books. I fervently hope astronomy and astrology haven't been bundled together as if they were the same. I would have far more objection to that than any possible negative stereotypes contained in a story. So are we voting, when we do vote on surplus materials eventually later on down the line, and I ask the question now because I'm not sure if you're going to be here at that point in the agenda, are we voting on the astrology books as well? I'd like to, follow the wishes that have been presented to us in this form and make sure that I'm voting to dispose of everything that we're being asked to dispose of.
Thank you, Joe.
Sarah, can you clarify?
Yes, it's astronomy. I believe that someone was helping me fill out that form and they just wrote the wrong word. It should be astronomy books in the 520s of nonfiction.
Thank you, Sarah. And those are 200, I guess, I don't know if you have your information. So those are 200 astronomy books?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So just, I guess an image just must have gotten in here about astrology books. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you both, Mary and Sarah, for being with us tonight, and good luck continuing with this project.
Thank you.
All right, the next presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mary. The next presentation is from our food service director, food service presentation, and I do see Garth. He just came on camera. So Garth, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me this evening to give you an update on the food service department. This year, well, not just this year, but since March of last year, we've had a very unique situation in terms of how we can deliver food to the students of our school system. It's actually gone very, very well. Surprisingly. I'm actually shocked that things have gone as well as they have, considering it was just something that we've never done before. It's nobody's ever done before, and I'm very happy with the results. I mean, obviously there's things that we can tweak and get better at, but for the most part, I think things are going in the right direction. So I've just created this presentation, this PowerPoint, just to give some kind of indication as to how we're doing in terms of where we were last year. I mean, in terms of number of meals sold, financial information, things like that, just as a comparison. So I don't So I guess we'll just go with the first slide. And this is the average participation by year for the past 3 years. And you can see that the participation that we have now has increased over last year and the previous year. One of the reasons for that is because we're actually serving more of the students who are physically in the buildings at any given time. So the participation rate is high, which is a good thing. Hopefully, you know, once we get back to everybody's in school all the time, you know, we can maintain this rate, which we're obviously going to try to do. And this again is just the average of participation by year. You know, obviously we have less students in the buildings, but we're actually feeding more of the physical students who are there than we have in the past, which is a good sign.
Do you need us to move? Oh, there we go.
And this slide is an indication of where we are financially in the department compared to last year, 2019, 2020. And you can see that we've received a lot more federal reimbursement because obviously every meal that we're serving is reimbursed at the free rate, opposed to what we would typically get would be, you know, a variation between paid, free, and reduced meal. So that's why that figure is much higher than last year. And we've actually spent less money this year because we're not purchasing as much food as we have in the past because we can't, because of the situation that we're in terms of the meal delivery. You know, because the students are coming down from the cafeteria, so we can't offer as much, so we're not purchasing those items. But we're also not getting the, you know, the a la carte revenue that we typically would get, and things like that. It's just, it's very, it's strange because you would think that intuitively, you know, we're doing less meals than we were before, so we should be making less money. But that's not the case, and that the only reason is because we're getting so much more of a reimbursement from the federal government for the meals that we're actually serving. And we're starting to tick up in terms of the number of meals that we're serving in the schools, given the number of students that are there. This is just an indication of what we're actually receiving in terms of breakfast and lunch.
Garth, can you hear me? We're gonna, if you don't mind, we have a couple of hands raised in the room, so I'm gonna pause here and take a question. Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay.
Yes. Hi, Garth. I was hoping you could speak to the line item supplies, and I know you just kind of spoke about that you're using fewer things. So I just happened to notice a significant difference between, you know, last year of 9,500 and this year 500. And in my head, I think, okay, well, we're serving more meals. And in my head, I'm going, well, that's got to require some different supplies than we're normally utilizing because we're taking food out of the classroom in boxes or whatever. It seems a significant difference. So I was wondering if you could speak to that.
One of the differences, we're actually using a lot more disposable items because of the feeding that we're doing now, especially in the, well, actually in all 4 schools. One of the differences is that we received a grant last year for that specific purpose.
Okay.
So therefore, a lot of those costs are being put against that grant.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. I just didn't see it. I mean, I saw the federal reimbursement and the state reimbursement, but I didn't know where supplies fell in one of those. But that's a different grant. Okay.
Yeah, and Garth, before we move on, just for my own knowledge on the revenues, so catering I understand, miscellaneous, it went from 0. Can you just tell us, what is that miscellaneous category for this year, 2021?
Those would be items that, like I purchase things for the school nurses' offices, school offices, the school store at the high school, and that's just the reimbursement for the things that I'm buying.
Okay, so you didn't have any of those types of expenses the year before because it shows 0?
Probably not through the first, from September to December.
Oh, okay.
I think that's you're looking at revenue,
Oh,
and he's talking about expenditure.
okay. Oh,
So,
I see.
Garth, do you know what
Yes.
would be included in the miscellaneous revenue?
Miscellaneous revenue would be, like I said, reimbursement for things that were purchased for different programs. Because obviously we're not doing any what we would call catering now.
So why was it 0?
So, the catering is also listed there.
Yeah, I think it was for revenue up in the very top section, in the very top, under revenue. So it said, there was 0 in the miscellaneous category for 1920, and then there was a 334866. I was just curious what that was.
It's just how it's categorized in budget sense.
Okay. All right.
So maybe that's something we can confirm and get back.
Okay, that's fine. All right, we'll figure it out. Thank you, Garth. Go ahead.
Again, this is the rates that we're being reimbursed at for all the meals that we claim for each specific month, and we're being reimbursed at the severe need rate, which is the highest rate that you can get for each meal that you get. Joy Jordan did a food service survey for parents in the fall, where she asked specific questions, and about 230, 240 people responded, and we collected the information just to give us an idea of what people thought of the program as it was then, and what we could do to improve the offerings and the delivery of the meals to the students. And this is a graph of the different things that they were, how they responded to different categories. And this is a graph of how, a pie chart of how the delivery of the services are viewed by the people that responded to the survey, which is actually very, very positive. Which means that, obviously we're always trying to better what we're doing, but I think the way in which we're doing it has received a very positive response. And these are just some of the items that we've done in terms of trying to get more students to, take the meals, because obviously everything is free. So the more meals that students take, the more reimbursement we get, which makes it easier to run the department. So at the very, very beginning in September, we started with, everything was just cold sandwiches. Pretty much everybody did the same thing. And then after we got acclimated to how the delivery systems were going to work in each of the schools, then we started to add hot meals into that kitchen, which has made a huge difference because the kids respond a lot better to a hot meal than they do to just the food. Although we still have those too, because there will always be kids that just want one particular thing. And we just have to make sure that we have something available so that they take that thing, or whatever meal it is, whether it's breakfast or lunch. I started a vegan gluten-free menu at the high school partially because the students there contacted me directly and asked me if I could, if I could do something like that. So now we have vegan gluten-free meals available daily that change week to week at the high school. And then we're always trying to find out what the students actually want to eat. A lot of times you can offer things that you think that maybe are the best things for them, but it's not necessarily what they're going to take. So you have to have those things and have the things that they're actually going to eat. Because it's always better for the children to actually eat than not eat. And one of the things we're going to start doing in March is one of the things that we did last year that worked extremely well. We did this thing called Taste It Thursdays, where we would offer different vegetable and fruit items that were just included with the meal, just so the students could try something different to get them, out of the regular things that they were used to. And it worked very, very well. And I think that it will work well again, even in this environment that we're in. And one of the other big things that we've done this year is we've developed this new website that we have for the food service department. And if you have a chance, go on the website, and there's all kinds of information on there. And there's also the menus are now interactive menus, whereby you hover over any food item that's on the menu for a particular day, and it will give you a complete nutritional breakdown of that menu item.
Thank you, Garth. Any questions? And those in the Zoom room, I can't quite see you just yet. Hey, Garth, if you're still there, I do have a couple of questions. The first one, and I don't know, Joy's in the room, so she might be able to. With the survey, so it looks like 203 responses. Do you have any idea where those came from? Were they elementary, or are they just totally random? Yes, please, thank you.
I think it was predominantly the middle school, if I'm not mistaken, Joy.
Okay, thank you. Joy is coming to the mic. Go ahead.
Joy Jordan, Community Engagement Coordinator. Yes, Garth is right. It covered all of the buildings, but there was a slightly higher percentage coming from the middle school, but there were responses from all 4 of the buildings.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And let's see, hold on. I had another question with the money that's coming in, the federal reimbursement, because you had said that the more people take the meals, the more you're getting back. Is anybody at all paying for meals this year?
No.
Okay, so none of our students at all this year in any building are paying for meals?
No.
Okay, all right. Thank you for clarifying that. And I like the vegan and gluten-free. I think that's a good option for some of our kids. And do they have to order that ahead of time? How does that work?
No, we just make a certain number for each of our feeding stations that we have at the high school. We have 2 different areas that we feed at, and they just bring those up there. It's the whole situation is a lot easier at the high school because we have warming carts and cooling carts that we have in 2 different locations, and the students are actually coming to pick up the meals that they want from those. So it's kind of like a mini cafeteria in each of those locations. Whereas the 2 elementary schools and the middle school, they actually have to sign up ahead of time so that we know, because they're being delivered to the classroom, what they want and how many meals of whatever particular variety we have to package up to send to them.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Anybody in the Zoom room? All right. Thank you very much. It looks like we're good, Garth. Thank you for coming tonight.
Yes, sir.
All right, so now we're going to move to the next item under reports and discussions, which is the FY22 budget. Michael, I guess? I know, you just sat down.
I think it's going to be between the superintendent and I.
Okay.
You want to wrestle it out? Or? rock, paper, scissors?
So we have a budget presentation that we'll be doing in Chatham on Tuesday, which is the same budget presentation that the school committee has got. We'll just be presenting that, request to go to Chatham to present that. We will go and also answer questions that they might have on the financial impacts of any sort of, shifting if there was an alternate assessment agreement that was reached. And we will gladly talk about some of the savings and things that Chatham's realized, and we'll kind of cover that under the next little portion on the agenda tonight.
All right.
And we're due to come back to you for a final vote on the budget on March 11th.
That is our next meeting.
Yeah.
Phew.
That'll be the final vote.
Yeah. We're all finished.
Yeah, but over vacation, nothing fiscally changed.
Okay.
Good
Yes,
news.
that's good.
So that's it? That's a very short report.
And the next item is
Okay, before we move to the next item, I see a waving hand. Go ahead, Sharon.
I have a question on the budget, and that is that I had heard that, I guess because of classroom sizes, because of COVID, that there was a reduction at the middle school of an art teacher for this year. And so evidently 5th grade has art, but not 6th and 7th grade. And so I understand, I hadn't heard at all about that till a month ago, but I don't know if there are any other reductions like that for space, but what I'm interested in is going ahead for the budget for next year to make sure that all those things are in the budget. Like that program, or if there's anything else that was taken out for space that we hadn't heard about.
Okay, thank you, Sharon.
so.
Okay.
Yeah,
And Scott, when you speak, I got a report. There can't hear you in there, so you might want to get right up on it.
pull it, Jackie.
Right, just stick it in there.
So just to clarify, Sharon, I think it's less about reductions because of space and more that we're having to run parallel in-person and virtual. So we have one UA teacher that we're dedicating to provide some UA offerings. So we're not providing the exact same things to our remote students and our in-person students.
It's hard to hear what's being said.
I don't know if it's the mic, if our, Leah, would you see if they can bring another mic? I don't know if it's Scott's mic.
He's not amplified in here either.
Oh, okay, so it could be his mic. Let's just see what's going on. Hold on one second, everybody. We're just going to swap mics here.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear that.
Okay,
Is it better?
So what I'm saying is, we have to keep in mind, this is sort of a unique year. It's less about reductions because of class size and more that we have to offer both in-person and virtual universal arts at the middle school. So we don't do the same thing for both of the groups only because we have to assign a teacher one direction or the other direction. So the offerings are going to be back when everybody's back in the building.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm getting signals in the Zoom room. They can't hear you at all.
These signals?
Let's.
Charles gave up. He left. He's like,
Robert can talk into it.
It just sounds like he's underwater.
We are.
Well, he is. He's taking a swim.
I kind of got the gist that you said it was
Can you hear me now?
about more like function rather than anything else. Is that affecting anything besides that 6th and 7th grade art? Is it happened in other buildings or other areas?
No.
Okay. All right. And so is it in our budget for next year to have that again?
We'll be returning, we'll be returning to,
It's
the
like
art
God.
will be returning to how it was previously. So the changed art this year is just a one-off to get through this year with the remote learning and so on. And next year, there's no reduction in art planned.
Okay, so let me just repeat that so I make sure that I heard what Michael said. So I thought you said, Michael, that it's just when we come back from the hybrid to all in person, and that there's money still in the budget proposed for next year, so that or anything else that's been changed so that people would fit in the room is coming back for next year. Is that correct?
Yes, pretty much. Except the things we talked about in the budget presentation, when we listed the positions which were changing.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
are the only changes.
I
There's
didn't
no
know.
other changes.
I wanted to clarify because I was confused.
Okay. Did that
Thank you.
clarify, Sharon? Okay. Thank you. And there was, I think Scott had also said earlier that he's presenting the budget to Chatham next Tuesday at their meeting, was his comment that he made earlier. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we're going to move to the next item, which is FY12 through FY22 assessment comparison. And Scott will come up to the big mic.
You're broken.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Woo.
Great. Oh, yes.
So in your packets, there's sort of a grid that has school spending in the two towns, FY7 to FY22. So, I want to sort of spend some time and just explain why I put this in here. I think last week, or last time we met, Charles had asked during public comment and made some mention about school spending and that Chatham that Chatham has been saving and that Harwich has had increased costs and I just wanted to just make sure that we addressed that and provided that those numbers. And I also do this in context of the article that showed up in the Cape Cod Chronicle saying that the Harwich Selectmen are prepared to turn down the school district's budget. And so I want to share, first of all, how incredibly short-sighted I think that would be in context with understanding the assessments FY11 to FY22. And Charles's analysis and public comment tonight provided, which is the same data as in your packet, is accurate. I mean, you can look at the Chatham numbers, and in FY11, as the district was coming together, you can see up there, Chatham was spending $10.1 million on its schools. In FY22, in the assessment that we have, Chatham's school spending is $8.6 million. And Harwich in FY11 was spending $20.3. In FY22, we're looking at $27.6 million. So, so one town's school spending has gone down, the other has gone up, and I know that has created angst. But I think we have to fully understand the numbers. You have to also understand some of the history behind the numbers. So keep in mind that our regional agreement assesses the two towns for the costs of their schools based on the statutory method that's spelled out in Massachusetts general law. And I will adequately emphasize that both Harwich and Chatham, despite what the numbers look like up there, that both Harwich and Chatham have fiscally saved because of regionalization. And more importantly, both Harwich and Chatham
have much better schools today than they had prior to regionalization. So our towns, regardless of what was in the article in the Chronicle, our towns have saved money and our towns have much better schools. So now to sort of dive into the numbers. As I said, it's easy to look at the Chatham number and see, wow, 1.5 million in savings since over FY11. But you have to also understand that Chatham number. In FY11, Chatham was spending millions of dollars to go and subsidize school choice children coming into that town. I'd argue that $10 million number is probably almost $3 million above and beyond what it would have been had Chatham just educated its own kids. You have to also keep in mind that in FY11, a significant number of Harwich's children were in Chatham being educated. So the Harwich number at the same time, so Harwich at 20.3 million, that number was artificially low in many ways. A significant number of Harwich's children were out either in Chatham Public Schools or at Nauset. And so I was hired during the FY12 year to come in and start in FY13. And it was really made clear to me by Nancy and Terry and the others that were on the school committee at the time, and by the parents and the staff that I met. There was a school pride issue. It was something that was very loud and clear in the conversations. And that school pride issue was that so many of Harwich's kids were going elsewhere. And what could we do to turn the trend? We needed to go and make sure that we had better schools to keep kids here. We've done that. We've been keeping kids here. And again, my worry when you have conversations like the Harwich Selectmen want to shoot down our budget is when that happens, families flee. We saw it about 6 years ago when there was a similar conversation in Harwich. We see it on our end as a school district every time Meredith School District next door has some budget turmoil. We see they start calling up Leah. She's the one that fields the school choice phone calls, and we see flight this way. When you don't see towns supporting the schools, you see flight out, and it costs the district in the end. Harwich also has to keep in mind what happened in FY11. In FY11, because there was so much dissatisfaction with the schools, a charter school that used to be in Orleans decided to go and relocate themselves. And they set up shop during that calendar year in FY11, set up shop in Harwich. So the school district started as Monomoy was coming together. We also had, the charter school, they're setting up shop in their backyard. And while the school choice children were taking with them $5,000 each from the school district, charter school children were taking the full per pupil spending. So they're taking 3 times as much. So, we'll just say up front, Harwich's costs keep going up. And yes, Chatham's costs have continued to trend down. But if we go to the next slide here, it just sort of explains it all, maybe hard to read, but there are 3 lines up there for Harwich and 3 lines for Chatham. And they all trend, they all overlap with each other. This is the percent, one of them is the percent of Harwich's budget, or the percent of the assessment. The other is the minimum required contribution towards Harwich, and the other is Harwich's foundation enrollment, the number of children that live in Harwich that go to public schools that we're financially responsible for. You'll notice that they all trend tightly up together. the assessment, the minimum required contribution, the enrollment. It's all based on enrollment. The enrollment drives this equation. Chatham's lines, all tightly tied together, all heading slightly down, and again, it's enrollment. You know, the enrollment determines what the minimum required contribution is going to be, which determines what the ultimate budget assessment is going to be. This is an enrollment issue, and the reality is, we all know it, Chatham is losing enrollment at a slightly faster rate than Harwich is losing enrollment. And it's causing Chatham's costs relative to Harwich's to be changing. So, to keep in mind history, FY11 was the last year that Harwich Public Schools and Chatham Public Schools operated completely separately. Town meetings, special town meetings, December 6, 2010, had votes to regionalize. In FY12, Monomoy was operating only from a central office perspective. So there was my predecessor, a transitional superintendent was in place for that FY12 year. So there were Harwich Public Schools, Monomoy Public School, or Harwich Public Schools, Chatham Public Schools, Monomoy Central Office running it, but there were savings there in FY12 because there was at least regionalization at the central office level. I was hired in FY13 to bring the schools together. We still in FY13 had 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, 2 elementary schools. FY14 was the year where we first fully regionalized. So it's fair to go back and say, okay, what was school spending and compared to FY11? You know, how are we tracking compared to FY11? Because FY11 was the last year that the towns operated separately. So we've done a little historical analysis here. And up here on the left, we have look at how Harwich was tracking FY7 to FY11, pre-regionalization. What were the annual increases in school spending in Harwich, pre-regionalization? And that was Harwich was increasing at 3.5% year after year on its schools pre-regionalization. Post-regionalization, since FY11, Harwich has increased on average 2.9% per year. The school spending has had an increase of 2.9%. So it's spending less. There is savings there. But I would argue that to look at the grid on the left is not comparing apples and apples. It's an apples and oranges comparison because prior to regionalization, Harwich needed a new high school, and I would strongly argue Harwich needed a new middle school too. So a more accurate comparison is to pull out school debt spending because debt plays a big role in what some of the increases have been. So if you exclude the cost of building the new high school, and Harwich got a wonderful middle school in the what was Chatham's middle high school, and if you pull out the debt, because there was no school debt for Harwich prior to FY11, we have a 3.5% annual increase in spending, has dropped to a 2.4% increase in spending on its school, averaged out over the years FY11 to FY22. It's spending, it's having more savings compared to what it was, the way it was tracking before regionalization. There is savings that Harwich is realizing there, or it's less costs, if you want to think of it that way. So I'm a little worried that, it's sort of like something's wrong with the regional agreement. Well, the regional agreement, the statutory method, is helping Harwich. It has been helping Harwich. It has been helping Chatham too. It's just enrollment. Enrollment alone is driving the trends, the trends that we're seeing. And if Chatham gets to a place that we're seeing increases in enrollment, then then we'll see that start to shift. But, had Harwich not regionalized, its minimum required contribution would still go up. It's found like that graph that you saw would continue. So it's minimum required contribution for Harwich, if it was on its own, or a minimum required contribution for Chatham, they would still trend in the same direction because they're both tied to enrollment. But there is savings there. It's just sort of a different way of looking at it. The proposal that I had been talking about with, let's look at an alternative assessment method that's something different than the statutory method where we have the towns pay for their own elementary schools, would provide additional savings towards Harwich because, we've very publicly talked about how running a smaller elementary school has higher costs because you have sort of less of those economy of scales. So again, there's savings there based on the statutory method. There's more if we can work with our two towns and get to a point where we get to an alternative assessment that that might be, again, benefiting Harwich, helping Chatham support support the school, its school, and support all students in Monomoy at the same time too. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? And I'm looking in the Zoom room. If you are in the Zoom room and you want to ask a question, just say my name, call out. Nobody? Do you have more to say?
Sharon.
So can I ask a question for public information? So since you mentioned the article, Scott, since you mentioned the article in the Chronicle, if, hypothetically, the 22 budget is turned down in Harwich, what happens?
Well, I think Michael and I will need to work with the admin team to identify what doesn't get funded. And that's where we get into a very delicate thing. So for our next school committee meeting, we'll have to look at, what would not be funded. I think if there is a non-vote on the school budget, or the school budget's voted down at a town meeting, you go into a 1/12 budgeting situation, which means we would be operating based on this year's budget. The commissioner steps in and you operate on this year's budget with the increases that would be seen in Chapter 70 and this or that. So it's your spending is based on current year plus some small amount that the state's funding, but there would be some cuts to our program. We'll say we have I think we actually have the smallest budget increase that we've ever had. So the cuts would be off of that small budget increase, but it still would mean some reductions. And again, reductions are not something that parents are going to respond well to, because it's like pick that reduction, and families that are impacted oftentimes then look at, are our children going to see better services in a charter, in another school district? And that then, has more money that's flowing out, and it just, creates further reductions because you've lost funding from the students that have left. So again, it was short-sighted before, and I just worry. I did reach out to Joe Powers just to emphasize that, that it would, I am worried about the short-sightedness of it.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Nancy?
I have a lot of thoughts flowing through my head. So I very much appreciate, Scott, you bringing up the going back to pre-regionalization into regionalization, because I remember there was a whole lot of conversation, and Terry, I'm sure you remember as well, and Sharon, you as well, that it was a switch of Harwich's students were being educated in Chatham, at Chatham Public Schools. Harwich was only paying $5,000 for those students, and then post-regionalization, boom, now all of a sudden they were going to have to pay for those students. So I think, I remember it now, totally forgot about it, so thank you for bringing that up. So remembering that was a huge, I don't want to say issue, but a huge wake-up call when Harwich was hoping for savings with regionalization, but they had savings, but they also had to pay for their students. So I think that's a very important point to remember. I also think that it's a very hard concept to swallow, thinking about the fact that Chatham is paying less because they have less kids. And Harwich has less kids, but Chatham has more less kids. And every year, so Chatham is realizing and seeing this greater savings every year for a negative reason. And it's hard for Harwich taxpayers to say, well, they're saving so much money. Well, yeah, they're saving so much money because they have that many less kids. And so it's just, like I said, I don't really have questions or thoughts, but those are just some of the things that were going through my head. And it's hard to realize, kind of like it was hard to realize that back in 2012 and 13, Harwich saw a bump in their spending on schools because they had to pay the $15,000 per kid instead of the $5,000 that were going school choice elsewhere, which is a good thing because that means the kids were being educated under their roofs instead of somebody else's. So just some of those thoughts that I think are important to make sure that is shared, and I appreciate your average increase before regionalization versus post-regionalization. I think that's I like numbers, so I very much appreciate seeing those numbers, and I think that's a good point as well to see that their increase is less on average now than it was before. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Terry?
I think Nancy's description was accurate. And the interesting thing about it, as I witnessed it from this side of the table, at the time, whatever was going on in Howard that caused about 100 kids, I don't have it in front of you what the breakdown levels, but about 100 Howard kids with a check for about $5,000 went to Chatham. That was a win for Chatham at the time because they needed kids, and it enlarged their classrooms from X to X plus 3 or 4. And that went on for several years until finally even Chatham realized that it was too expensive. That was a win budget-wise at the time for those several years for Howard, accepting the drain raised parent issues about what was going on to cause that. So it was, in a sense, a win-win, and on the other hand, something that was needed to be corrected on both towns because for different reasons. One, it was too expensive to have a small class at Howard High, and the 5,000, kind of similar what's happening with Nauset right now. When they're looking at opening up a new school or $100 million restoration of their school based on 910 youngsters instead of 650. So, you know, good input for those who, not being around 10 years ago, is just a vague memory.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Anybody? Joe, go ahead.
Well, a quote or two from just a few moments ago. Dr. Carpenter said, the enrollment drives this equation. This is an enrollment issue. And Dr. Carpenter also lamented the I think it was the William Galvin article in the Chronicle. So I just put those two things together. What made the Chronicle article inadequate was that it did not give enrollment figures. It said this town pays such and such, this town pays such and such. To simplify it, Harwich is paying 75% of the budget, Chatham pays 25% of the budget, without any discussion of the enrollment figures. There's no explanation of why there was a discrepancy of what the towns were paying. And that's an inadequate explanation that is the fault of the writer of that article. Hopefully that'll improve. I think we need to point out the problem, because also, unfortunately, I think more people read newspaper or go online for that information than follow school committee meetings. As interesting as I tend to think we are, but unfortunately, I think the local press gets wider distribution than we do. So the information we've heard here today, this isn't the only time we're going to be called upon to explain this. As I see it, there's something that can't be avoided. Chatham and Harwich are a unified school district now. We are together now. We're joined together. There's no point talking about, what could have happened in 2010 or would people have voted if they had known, etc. Right now, we're together. And the problems that we have that I think are apparent, that the school committee has voted on, right? We've talked about inequity, which I think is a pretty strong word and indicates our feelings. But these are things we have to work out together as two towns, one district. I can't imagine, this is a situation where imagine one arm punches the other arm and then you say you won. It makes no sense. And, I don't know. There's an idea that you don't cut off your nose to spite your face. It would be even worse to cut off your face to spite your nose, right? If the budget is not approved by the town of Harwich, if the Board of Selectmen in Harwich vote against the budget, they're voting against a budget that provides services, 3/4 of which are for Harwich students and the parents of those students. 1/4, of course, would be Chatham. And, it's not exact, I'm simplifying it a little bit. Dr. Carpenter said short-sighted. I agree. My reason for it is simply, given the fact that we are joined, to strike at Chatham, if Harwich wants to do something that is harmful to Chatham as a kind of way to force Chatham to get in line, Harwich has to hit itself 3 times in order to hit Chatham once. It doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's short-sighted is a nice way to put it. I think it speaks to a very deep frustration when Harwich Board of Selectmen feel like that's the road they have to take. And out of that frustration, they make a choice that ultimately isn't in the best interest of their town. Because what happens is they import a battle into Harwich that they don't need to import. It's going to be roughly parents of school-age kids versus people who do not have school-age kids are going to go to the polls and fight each other. That's a shame. And it shouldn't happen. It doesn't benefit anybody. We should continue the work that we are doing to try to get the funding formulas corrected. We should certainly promote the idea that every town should pay for its elementary school and begin to take the steps to modify the regional agreement in ways that are mutually agreeable for the two towns. The one thing that was very important by founding fathers for our agreement was they anticipated that in the future, issues would arise. They didn't know what they would be, didn't predict it would be overfunding, but they knew that there were going to be issues that would come up, and they provided a mechanism for dealing with those issues. There is a way to modify the regional agreement, and we need to pursue that because we are a Monomoy regional school district. Harwich, Chatham, we are together. We are going to continue together. We are going to live together or die. It's as simple as that. Okay.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else?
I'll take it first.
Okay, Terry?
Joe, well said. If I could capture it from the same vantage point, I think we all agree that it is a problem that cries out for a solution. I think what we've done in the past 6 or 7 months as a school committee has been very appropriate. And there's been several meetings along the way, culminating in a joint meeting about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think now, being optimistic, that the Howard Select Board and the Chatham Select Board, as we meet in the next month or two, will recognize that there's a solution that is between the two of those groups. And to simplify it, somehow the reduction of kids in Chatham has increased the cost of educating those kids in Chatham Elementary. Now, somehow means not enough outsiders who would like to live in Chatham can't afford it right at the moment, the past years. So that's a problem. The layman living in Howard sees that as, okay, I can understand that. If Chatham recognized that several years ago and began to subsidize their own kids financing that school gap, it would be, gee, that's tough, but why do we have to do this? Because we don't have enough kids. Unfortunately, the burden has fell on the other town. And I don't see it as one body with two arms, but two individual people working as a team. And that town has to dig a little bit deeper until finally it's kind of deep to make certain that school in Chatham survives. And therein lies the two differences. So somehow the two groups, with our help, need to come to a point where it's balanced and not, as Nancy said the other night, a Band-Aid for a year or two. No, it's got to be the long-lasting one, with the school committee monitoring the population of the kids, and we come up in the next year or two with a solution for Chatham and Howard Elementary that makes sense curriculum-wise. In the meantime, if one town is going to have to make up the balance by subsidizing that difference because of the smallness of one school, to many people in this town, that seems to be the wrong town to be subsidizing it. If I am a Chathamite and I say, I really want to keep that school, then the question might be, at what expense? If you're willing to pay another $100 or whatever it might be tax-wise for the assessment, then that's that commitment to allow it to continue on. And I think we've got a few months, but I think we're going to see some movement.
Thank you, Terry. Anybody else? Nancy?
Just a quick thought, and it's being kind of pedantic, but I think that when Harwich, the selectmen were talking, they don't have a problem with our budget. They have a problem with the assessment of the budget. Because if they have a problem, I didn't watch the video, I read the article, so I didn't watch the commentary that actually happened. And I don't think there's an issue with our less than 1% increase in our budget for FY22. It's the assessment issue. So it would be, I don't know, maybe I would feel better if they would say, hey, your budget's great. We got to figure out this assessment, and I'm not going to vote for the assessment. I'm going to, I just, again, feeling a little pedantic, but it makes it sound like our budget is outlandish, and it's not. It's responsible budget of less than 1% increase. So that was all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to respond to that because I did watch the video, and you're right, Nancy, because there was no mention of the budget. It sounded to me like there was no issue, but it was about the whole assessment. And so, as Joe was speaking just a second ago, and I don't know if we want to, I could put this on the March 11th agenda, but as Joe said, more people read the Chronicle than they're watching this school committee meeting. And I wrote, do we need a response to this? Because Joe is right. I think we do need to get accurate information. If we're going to engage in this, people need to have the information. So I don't know if we're ready to maybe talk about another joint meeting and have Scott present what he presented tonight and let us have this dialogue about this. And quite honestly, if the budget is turned down, I do want to have a conversation with everybody around the table so that everybody understands what happens, because we are going to be cutting into programs if that budget comes back. I mean, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think if it got shot down, we're looking at about $2.5 million cut, I think, right? Something like that. So anyway, it's not a small number. So if everybody's in agreement on the 11th, we can talk about another joint meeting. I mean, because I do agree with Joe. I think we have to take the lead on this response and not let people, hope that people are watching our meeting. So I've got nods. Jackie?
Yeah, I'm
kind of thinking it through. All right. Oh, Scott, go ahead.
I definitely do think we need to at least talk about what a down the budget would look like and what the financial and programmatic impact would look like, because you can't go into a town meeting without articulating that to those present.
Yes, Nancy, and then Jackie.
Presumably, Harwich is going to be talking about the budget at their next selectmen meeting on Monday. So maybe it would behoove to have some of the upper echelons of our committee and business manager and superintendent to maybe be there to say something like that, or is that?
As I understand it, moving in quorum, we would have to file, I guess, a meeting if we're going to go, and probably have to ask for a place on the agenda. I don't know, today's Thursday. I don't know I think it's too late to get on their agenda for Monday. But I agree with you.
Or even coming in at public comment and
Possibly.
saying, hey, because we weren't invited to the meeting on Monday, this past Monday.
Should have been.
So therefore, can show up at public comment and as members and say, after viewing the meeting, these are some thoughts.
Right. We could certainly do that. Terry, go ahead. And then Jackie, I'm sorry.
My thought, and I haven't really had beyond what we've just had about any time to consider this, but I heard that Dr. Coffin is going to Chatham next Tuesday. I would hold off my suggestion, the Monday Board of Selectmen Harwich meeting, for any of us to come for public comment. I think you're far better off stirring a pot that you know what's in it. And I think a Chronicle article, I didn't see it and I wasn't present. I think we'd be better off given this, say, a 2-week opportunity for Scott to give an overview for our budget to the Chatham folks, and then let's see what happens in the next, say, 10 days.
Thank you. Jackie.
I agree with everything that's being said, and I think, Terry, you make a good point that we need to see what we're talking about before maybe we go in front of Harwich, although I think it would have been appropriate had we been asked to present again or comment and be there for the budget for Harwich. And then I would say I feel that, and I've said this before, we're running on 2 different issues right now, and it's getting very gray. And unfortunately, what my interpretation of it is that the assessment is being used to fuel the town taxpayers of Harwich, and it's putting a negative light on our budget, which is a very, very responsible budget. And it's unfortunate that that's the way it's been twisted. So it's kind of become kind of convoluted. And I honestly don't feel that the assessment is something that is going to be agreed upon before the budget vote. So I think we, as a committee, also need to further clarify that from the town of Chatham, which I think is important, on why we go and do the presentation. I also think you need to have an impact statement about the budget if Harwich were to vote it down, what that would look like. However, I don't feel like using the budget as a negotiating tool is a responsible thing to do for either town. And I feel like that's what's happening. It is what's happening. I don't feel it. It is what's happening. Whether you can twist it, you can turn it, you can say it 6 different ways, that is what's happening. They're taking an opportunity, one town is taking an opportunity to try to get another town to shift. We all in the room know, they all know there's an issue. They want us to solve it. We're working on it. The assessment's not going to be fixed before budget season vote. It's not. So I think we can come to an agreement that we'll work on it, but we really need to pull the budget out of the whole conversation, get Harwich on board with this responsible budget, and they should be responsible to get, as Joe said, their town taxpayers on board to support the community for this year so that we can then work on the assessment. But without that, we're not even giving the tools to do it. We really need to work as a regionalized district right now, and we're not. This is exactly why regional districts fall apart. You know, we're getting ready on the agenda to start talking about school choice and whether a Harwich child going to Chatham or a Chatham child going to Harwich should be considered a district child or an out of town resident. That, you know, and think about the impact of that. Why would I, and this is hypothetical, but why would I, as a Chatham resident, say, oh yeah, it's okay that a Harwich student can come in and they have precedence over a Dennis or a Yarmouth kid? Harwich isn't supporting me. Why do I want a Harwich kid to come in? You know what I mean? It just, it starts to create all of this angst and unnecessary energy. So I just feel like we really need to clarify, get the budget separate from the assessment. Both towns need to understand that. You can't tie them together right now. You can't. Because our kids are going to be the ones that pay the price.
Thank you, Jackie. And just for clarification, I was trying to pull up the agenda from this past Monday. Just for clarification, our budget was not on the agenda. I think it was the response to the joint meeting about the assessment. And then they brought the budget into it. So the budget wasn't, I'm trying to pull up the agenda, but we weren't, so there was no invitation, I don't think, for us. Did you have a comment?
I was just wondering if we're ever presenting at Harwich. Do you have a date? Have they asked? Which is kind of awkward to say that, because normally we present to them shortly after.
Well, I will say this, watching the video, I'm pretty certain Michael McCaskill made the comment, because I think there was knowledge that we were going to vote on our budget on the 11th, and there was a comment that there was an expectation that we would be coming after that, based on the comment. I'd have to go back and look at it again, but that's kind of what.
I feel like the presentations are usually like February, before, or end of January, beginning of February, which I know things are delayed this year because of everything.
We have presented to both towns in.
But keep in mind.
Yeah, so we did do a budget presentation in Harwich over, was it January, Michael? It's all blurred together.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Okay.
Yeah. But we're voting on our final one on the 11th. So, but that was mentioned in there. I'm pretty sure it was Mike McCaskill, because there was an awareness that we were making our final vote on the 11th. Because I can't remember exactly, but he said it. So we'll probably see what it is finally, or whatever. I'll have to go back and look at the video. Sharon, go ahead.
Would there be, I mean, I honestly am hearing that we as school committee members are aware of what is going on in our towns each. And we're coming forward with that because, and we all are very protective of the school, but I would modify slightly Joe's analogy of being one, because our school is one, but our towns are two. And that's the problem. The school is part of the family members of the town. But I would wonder if Monday the 8th, when Harwich has their meeting, if maybe we couldn't either be on the agenda or before the agenda, or I'd be for if we had a meeting of the selectmen from each town and us. I think really this needs to be talked about before we vote our March 11th. And I was looking up to see when a good time would be, and there's meetings every day. But on the Monday the 8th, which is only a few days ahead, at least the Harwich selectmen do have a scheduled meeting. This is a question, I don't know the answer.
Thank you, Sharon. And just real quickly, I did pull up the February 22nd Harwich agenda. So here's how it is listed. It was listed as discussion and possible vote, Monomoy Regional School District budget regarding potential alternative assessment for FY22. So that was the agenda item. That was for this past Monday. And just because I serve on a couple of other committees, I know with Harwich, if we request to be on the agenda, we'd have to request it through the chair the Wednesday before. So if it's Monday the 8th we're looking at, March 3rd is when that's the latest that request can be made. So I guess we'll have to talk about that. Joanne, go ahead.
Yes, you remembered the conversation correctly, Tina. I just looked at my notes after having watched it. So that's a good piece. The other piece is, Scott, are you going to give this presentation the narrative that you just gave? Because you told me a whole story that was so important for me as a new person in Chatham, which I've been there now 10 years, full time. Are you going to do that in Chatham as well?
Yes, so this will be sort of put onto the back end of the same budget conversation that you've heard before. But I think it's important that their board understand the optics of it on some level, and hopefully can empathize with some of the angst from the other town.
I think it's excellent. I know Nancy likes the numbers. I like the story. And I think the two things together give a perspective to all sides. The other thing I would say about bringing the selectmen together again, I think they're going to feel like they've already done that. And they gave you your marching orders to do something about it, to fix it. And I'm not sure that coming together to talk about something we've already talked about might not sit well. That would be my thought. I don't know that it's going to sit well. And the other thing that didn't sit well with me the other night as I listened to Harwich's Board of Selectmen was the word subsidy. And that really bothers me because it sounds like Chatham is freeloading. And I think that fans the flame too. I go back to it's one school. Let's start to think about that. It's a school district. It's for kids. The parents are going to see what they're going to say what they're going to say. The boards are going to say what they're going to say. I don't know that the kids are that divided. I haven't spoken to them, so I can't give you that answer. But I think the kids see themselves as a unified body. And I guess I don't want to see that torn apart. I think it's too valuable And I think academically, clearly, the more kids you bring together, the more valuable it is. So those are my thoughts, but I thought this presentation, Scott, for me, was perfect. Me learning the history, that it sounds like it was a seesaw. In the beginning, one school, one town needed it, now another town needs it, and it's gonna maybe seesaw from, you know, we don't know. Like Joe said, the founding fathers wrote this paper, and we don't know how it's gonna be used at different times, but we've got to learn to work it out, and that's all.
Thank you, Joanne. Terry?
Joanne's initial thought, I agree with. I don't think us convening another three-part grouping makes any sense right now. The one thing I didn't hear, that evidently Joanne did, that the impression that the two select boards gave us the marching orders to solve this. I didn't hear that at all. I thought the information now is at a level where all three groups understand what the real issue is, and they were going to go back to their separate groups, whether or not you agreed with what the select board comments were, and that's got beside the point right now, that I think the ball is in their court. The select board in Chatham meeting with their town manager, meeting and brainstorming what they think they should do, what they think in good faith they shouldn't do or should do, and then they, hopefully within the next, let's say, month, would convey that to the select chair of Howard and say, all bets are off, no, because of these 8 reasons, or how does this sound? So that's how I see it. I agree with Joanne that I don't think bringing them together again would move the understanding any closer to the goal line.
Thank you. Jackie?
Terry, I agree with you 100%, and I'm wondering if, like we mentioned before, that we are the liaison between, that maybe we have, you know, our chair in communication, or maybe we have our own timeline, as we had voted that, you know, we all agreed the assessment is an issue. Maybe we need to have our own timeline of, our, you know, concept of a timeline of, you know, we're going to ask our chair or whomever to contact the Chatham Board of Selectmen and just kind of get an idea of, have you guys come up with anything? Just at some point, we need to reach out to either and just kind of see where they're at, because you're right, it's in their corner now. We're the liaison in the middle, we're the ones that, you know, are going to help push it through, but we might have to do a little bit of talking here and talking there. Okay, well, this is what we're hearing, this is what they want to bring to the table, and what do you think about that? Kind of like a mediator, you know, with 2 lawyers. I feel like we are going to have to be that presence to get it to move, because you're right. I think if we sit with us and the 2 of them, they're just going to kind of talk about different things, but nothing's going to be accomplished. So, yeah, I'm good. Let them go.
And as far as our vote for the budget, I think you proceed as understanding that we've had a preview in late January. It all made sense to us, and we move on, and we vote up or down in another February, March, whatever the date is. So I wouldn't even get that topic mixed right at the moment. So
yeah, I would agree, because Joanne, go ahead.
I just want to say to Terry, you're right, Terry. When I said I meant Chatham. You're exactly right. It was put in Chatham's lap to make a decision, not the school board's lap.
Right. Thank you, Joanne. And I think marching orders, Joanne, I think what I heard was that Chatham wants us to have this forum, which we're going to have. That was our commitment. That might have been the marching order that I took away. I don't remember really one from Harwich, other than they were wanting us to make a motion that night.
They didn't say much.
Yeah. But I think the marching order was that we would do the forum, which we are doing, and we'll talk about that a little later in the agenda. But one of the things I wanted just to throw this out, as the chair, I mean, I certainly, if you feel like we need to try to be on their agenda on the 8th, or at least me and maybe Terry, we're the liaisons, or whatever, we can figure it out. A request does have to get in by March 3rd, and we're not meeting again until the 11th. So if that's something that all of you feel is a necessary step, I need some guidance tonight. Terry, and then it looks like Meredith. Okay, Terry?
Assuming my busy schedule could be cleared, I don't have a problem presenting. However, I'm somewhat uncomfortable defending a budget that hasn't been officially challenged yet.
Yeah. That's true.
And so to arrive on that date to say, oh, by the way, I don't see any purpose at all. It's kind of
That's a good point, Terry.
let the bowl
Yeah.
stir a little bit before we do that. There'll be time for that, hopefully not. With maybe
Okay.
some good news. So
That's a good
my
point.
feeling.
Good point. Meredith?
And my 2 cents is to kind of hold off as well, with Dr. Carpenter going to present in Chatham on Tuesday, and then our forum next Thursday. I think hopefully we'll get some more information on where the community stands, where parents stand, where maybe Chatham will have some answers on Tuesday, so maybe just holding off on getting on their agenda.
Jackie?
And I agree on holding off as well, but I also want to point out that if they are discussing the budget and they are feeling that that they are going to vote it down, and or if it goes to town meeting, if the town's going to vote it down, that presentation we were talking about of the impact of what the budget would look like if we cut it and how that would look, that's an important conversation or presentation that we are going to need to definitely do to both towns, but most importantly to Harwich, to understand the impact if they don't move it through, or I don't like the way that sounds, but if they don't feel that it's an adequate budget or whatever, they need to see what that impact is, and it needs to be on public television what that impact is, because that word has to get out there as well. So
yes, I agree.
That will be important, but again, we need to wait, I think,
a
little bit and see what goes on.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like the consensus is not to move ahead with the March 8th. So we'll just scratch that, and we'll come back. And I will just tell you quickly, scanning Harwich's budget for Monday, March 1st, I don't see anything about Monomoy on the agenda. So anyway, so that's that. Any other dialogue, conversation? Any other comments? Okay, moving on to the next item, which would be the policy file JFBB school choice discussion. This came up at our last meeting, and we all agreed to bring it back for a discussion. And Sharon, I don't know if you would like to lead this conversation, or if you want me to.
I can attempt it. I don't know what money implications would be, because we, in our policy meeting, didn't address that at all. But so I don't see this as something that we are going to be accepting today, but it's a very large topic. And if you all can just look at your about JFBB, the policy for school choice, maybe we could take this step by step. Number 3, in our policy subcommittee, we had talked about resident students be given priority placement in any classes or programs within the district, but when we brought it to you, we were told that that isn't the policy right now, so there's presently a line drawn through that. And so the next topic that's brought up is to talk about where are our priorities? What do we want? For instance, do we want Chatham to have a priority at Harwich? I see this mostly as elementary schools, because the middle and high school are already together. But do we want a Harwich kid or a Chatham kid to have a priority in the other town's elementary school over somebody from Orleans or Dennis? That's a question mark. We can stop here and talk about that.
Okay,
before we move on.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
I personally like that idea, but I'm interested in other people. I can't see people, Tina, you'd have to call on them.
Yep, thank you. I'm going to start with Jackie and then Terry. Jackie?
So we're looking at item number 3 that struck, that was the resident students be given priority placement. And then if you scroll down, we could incorporate number 1 or number 2, correct? That's what our thoughts were. That kind of summarizes our thoughts. It can either be they have priority placement or they not have priority placement. So that's the question Sharon has.
Tina, I can't hear, I don't even know who it is that's speaking.
Jackie, could you pull your mic closer?
Can you hear me now?
Hold on, can you hear now? Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify. So number 3 is the one we're looking that we've struck. You got that, Sharon?
Sharon, can you hear Jackie? You can't hear? Joe, can you hear?
I can't.
Joanne? Sounds like they can't hear.
Bueller?
All right, so we're having another mic issue.
We try this one.
Oh, hold on. She does have an extra here. Hold on.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, because I guess it has to filter through the room.
No, these mics
Oh,
don't.
do you,
These mics don't go through the room.
oh, Jackie has to speak here. She has to come
Well,
up
you
here.
all heard what I said. I just reiterated what Sharon
so
said.
let
Can we
me,
just
so
carry on?
Sharon, let me just repeat what,
I just wanted to make it clearer for everyone.
Yeah,
Basically,
so Jackie-
number 1 or number 2?
yeah, so Jackie was just making a point, making sure that everybody understood that we were looking on the page 1, under 3, that's crossed out, that we were looking at either, where it says this policy should incorporate one of the following 2 statements. She just wanted to make sure that everybody understood we're looking at one of these 2 statements. It's just what she was just clarifying.
Tina, I couldn't hear you either.
Oh, my
Every other
goodness.
syllable was gone.
Okay, well, we're having an audio issue then. Tina Games School Committee. Can you hear me up here?
I can hear you fine.
All right. So Jackie was just clarifying. Jackie was just clarifying for everybody to make sure everybody understood. On 3, that's crossed out, it says this policy should incorporate one of the following 2 statements. So in order for a policy subcommittee to do our work, we need some direction from the school committee. So we're asking everyone, what are your thoughts on statement 1 and statement 2?
Yes.
All right, so I think let's go with Meredith and then Terry. Skip you.
So I think that we should, my personal opinion is I think that in thinking about us as a regional school system, I believe it would be a good idea to give the Harwich or Chatham students priority.
Thank you, Meredith. And it looks like they're still having difficulty hearing, so I'm going to tell you that Meredith said, Meredith is in agreement with statement 1. Terry?
I absolutely agree with Jackie and Meredith. There's no choice. I think, for example, we're a regional system. Children who live in Yarmouth, in Dennis, and in Brewster are not part of that region. So I think number 1 says all. Harwich and Chatham kids have priority of placement. So that's my feeling there.
Okay, can everybody, did you hear Terry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Nancy?
I'm not going to explain why, because I agree with everybody else, that number 1.
Okay, did everybody hear Nancy? Okay.
I said
Anybody else
number
wanna
1.
weigh in? Since I'm up here, I strongly, what? Oh, I'm being asked by Leah if all of you in the Zoom room can make sure your computers are turned up high, but everybody, none of them can hear it. Oh, Joanne, you can hear, okay. Right, okay. So in this room, for all of you in the Zoom room, everybody sitting in this room is in agreement that number 1, the statement number 1. So how do you all feel? I know Sharon already said hers. Joe?
Thank you. Tina, at our last meeting, I think on the 11th, you asked us to look over this draft proposal, to think about it, and try to come to this meeting tonight prepared. And as part of my thinking and preparation, I showed the draft to my wife, who looked at me and said, of the 2 choices outlined on the first page, I would have to choose choice number 1. Bad things were hinted if I did not agree. And I don't always do what I'm told, but the choice number one strikes me as a very important thing to do as a way of kind of helping our own.
All right,
And being part of what I said before. We are a unified school system, and if we really believe that's true, then it follows logically that number one would be the choice, in addition to the kind of marital threats I received.
Okay. Thank you for the comic relief there, Joe. All right, so we have all. Joanne, how do you feel? And you're on mute.
Exactly the same way as Joe.
Okay, so it sounds like we have our answer. And Melissa, I see your lovely face on camera, so I'm going to call on you. Melissa McGuire.
Hi, good evening. Melissa McGuire, Director of Student Services. Through the chair, if I might, can I just throw out a couple of pieces of information that need to be considered?
Yes, please.
So, number one is there are certain regulations that we must follow regarding school choice. So one is we must consider, okay, siblings of students who are currently in our schools through school choice, regardless of the town they live in, okay, as long as they are siblings biologically, okay, so that's one. Two is the regional agreement does not include currently an intra-district option, meaning an intra-district Chatham and Harwich being intra-district, making a choice between the schools. So in the document you have for consideration, it kind of, those are the two key points. Because the third one was about municipal employees' children, coming, which they can, but they can't be given consideration, okay, in terms of prioritizing. So that one is they can come with their seats, but it's not an issue regarding them being prioritized. So when you're thinking about, the two priorities, one you already have to consider, which is the sibling. The other one, of course, is then looking at creating that intra-district, okay, plan. So that would need to be part and parcel of your movement forward with your policies to have that. So I just wanted to make sure it was clear people understood that you must consider siblings, so that has to be part of your priority list. Anyway, so it was tough because you only have two choices. And the reason Harwich and Chatham weren't given that choice right now is for exactly the reason, and I believe I cited the piece of the regulation there, is that you have to have an intra-district agreement for that. So hopefully that helps to clarify some information.
Thank you. And can you hear me on this mic over here? In the room, can you hear me? Okay, good, because I swapped mics. So Melissa, let me ask you on page 2 of the draft, where it says question, and it gives us 3 choices. Should we be ranking those right now?
So the exercise was really there's only 2 choices, sibling, which is required, right, and then a child in Chatham or Harwich. And the reason that's there is because currently there is no preference for Chatham Harwich, as even though it's a regional district, it wasn't part of the regional agreement, including an intra-district school choice option. So you can give priority, A1 is required, which is the sibling, but you can now include, Chatham and Harwich by creating that intra-district plan. So unfortunately, the sibling isn't a choice. You can't choose a Chatham or Harwich resident over a sibling because that's a requirement by the regulation.
Okay, got it.
But you can include Chatham or Harwich as a priority versus another town. And that's really what you're really trying to get to, is to be able to include Chatham or Harwich students as part of an intra-district choice plan.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
It does. Jackie?
Yeah, I just, I want to avoid working on broaden the policy too much and just stick to the skeleton of the policy, in which we really just need to know the basics. So like 1 or 2, it seems like 1, we know that we have to make an exception for siblings, so in there somewhere we need to wordsmith with exception for sibling as defined. And then we need to move on to the siblings. How do we as a committee define siblings? And we've got a couple choices here. And then once we get through, if we agree on how siblings are defined, because I think it discussed, siblings are students who have a common parent, either biologically or legally through adoption, who live in the same household, step-siblings and foster children, and do not share a common parent, are not siblings for purposes of receiving a sibling preference for admission. So if everyone's comfortable with that statement, then we would move on to defining, our next big question is, do we define a Monomoy staff child as a preference? And we can't, because we've now put Chatham and Harwich as our preference, unless that staff member's child happens to be a sibling, which would cross-check it. So you would actually just take that piece out. And I don't think we need to note that Monomoy staff and child no longer have preferences. I think it's just not included in the policy. And then we would move on to the rank ordering. So we're really just at rank ordering at this point. I was just trying to...
No, that's great. No, thank you. Thank you very much.
So for the rank ordering, is there a need? Do we feel like we want to have a rank ordering for priority preference? So once it's Chatham, Harwich, and or sibling approved through the paragraph, then they need something to go by. And then is it a child with a sibling at Chatham Elementary in 3rd grade who lives in Dennis, a child of a teacher? So then it goes into, is it a sibling before a teacher's child, before a child who lives in Harwich? So to me, we've already answered 2 of those questions, in which a sibling of a child at CES, as long as it falls under the credentials of the sibling definition, should be first, then a child who lives in Harwich. And then we don't even need, or Harwich or Chatham, we don't even need a child teacher of a CES, because we're not doing that anymore.
Okay. Scott?
Woo!
I'd recommend that you keep the staff child thing as, so I would say that you would go a sibling, the child from the other town, then staff, then someone from outside. Otherwise,
is this a new benefit we're offering?
Well, I think otherwise I think for our staff, I think it's a good thing. Otherwise, you're potentially putting the staff person's kid in with the general lottery pool first. So I think you sort of establish the siblings first, the town, the intra-district next, that you have staff, and then you go to a lottery if you have additional slots.
I don't agree with that.
All right, I see Sharon's hand and then Nancy's hand. Sharon, go ahead.
So, I think this goes along with what I'm trying to hear Scott say, that at the bottom of page 1, they're talking about siblings or students who have a common parent, either biological or illegally through adoption. But I agree with what I think Scott just said, to add, the law says what the first sentence was, but to add, children who live in the same household, such as step-siblings and foster children. And we could, if we had to, make that the next item, but it seems pretty cruel to, I consider whoever lives in the same household, the family.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Nancy? Oh, Jackie?
I would, the only thing I would argue, Sharon, and I think we brought this up in our policy subcommittee meeting, is you run into issues that are common for other areas of people who live in a district they don't want to live in, so then maybe they have their child live with someone else to go to that school, and I don't really want to encourage that. So you kind of have to draw the line at some point, or else there's no point in doing any of the rating or any of the preference.
Sharon, did you hear that?
Probably not.
And Sharon, you're on mute. It sounds like you're responding, but go ahead.
She's mute.
So I guess I was thinking about any kid that's coming to school, like the example would be is if a child of Chatham or Harwich, or somebody we already accepted a sibling for, was coming to our schools, then I'm suggesting, and I think Scott said, that we would put in somebody in their household like I had asked. And I heard, I believe, Jackie say that she didn't want to have kids like be sent from another town over there to live there just to go to the school. I think that would be really rare, and I certainly don't want that. But if they were a resident of the town without even putting that in there, and we said Chatham and Harwich, if they were a resident living in that household, it would be a moot point, wouldn't it?
Jackie, then Nancy, and then Melissa looked like she was wanting to maybe say something. Go ahead, Jackie.
Well, I was, if Nancy, if you're gonna answer Sharon, you can. But I was gonna have a question for Melissa about the foster children. Because I do know that we have students that move in and out of the district because they move in and out of foster homes. But I believe that we honor that this is their school no matter where they move to. Is that correct? And do we need to put that in here somewhere?
That's not a school choice issue.
Okay.
So kids who are in foster care automatically are entitled to enroll in the district where that foster home is, or they can remain in the district that they are coming from. That's a whole separate law and regulation, so they don't even fall into school choice. So, and one of the reasons why they specifically state that, foster children are not a school choice issue. So regardless of the home they're in. So, and also remember that this only comes up when there are not enough seats. Then you have to make a decision of first your priority of students who are going to enter, because then you're doing a lottery. If you have one seat and 10 kids, who are those 10 kids that are going to be given preference, first for that one seat? It's rare in our district, right, that's going to happen. For the most part, Scott maybe knows the statistics more, how many times we've actually had to do the lottery for a seat. So that's, again, you just have to think about that. And I caution, and some of you know me, I'm like just a stickler on the law sometimes, right? Like you don't want to veer too far from it, because then someone's going to go back to the law and say, but the law says this. So, why did you allow, this child, just because they live in this house, when it clearly says if they're not a sibling biologically, then, or of course adopted, but then, why did they get choice over me? Like, you're getting into a bunch of those issues. It's clear cut, and it can be tied back to what the regulation states, and you're in a better position. The issue really is not about the sibling part. It's really about your decision related to Chatham and Harwich, because right now they're considered non-residents of each of the towns, if that makes sense, in your regional agreement. That's the bigger issue you have to kind of grapple with, not the siblings. That's law. You've got to consider them. It's making a decision to include now an inter-district school choice plan that basically says Chatham and Harwich residents or Chatham and Harwich residents. They're a regional resident, not separate, which it states now. Each child will attend their school in the town they live in. Yes, elementary. So that's really the focus of your issue, is to begin to include that as the policy of what you would like to do for your Chatham and Howard residents.
Thank you for that clarification. Meredith and then Terry.
Melissa, I'm just going to direct this to you because I'm guessing you'll know. Do we need to have a separate policy for intra? Or can it be part of just our school choice policy? We don't need a separate one.
It could be part.
Okay.
It can be a policy, your policy that's inclusive in your school choice is having an intra-district plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry?
Something, Melissa, you alluded to, whatever decision we as a committee make, were you suggesting that we add it to the regional agreement? If the answer is no, I agree with you. and I sort of have a way around that for us.
The answer is yes.
If you look at page 10 of our regional agreement, there is a very slight sentence that alludes to the Chatham Elementary and Howard, same towns, but it says the superintendent, and it really refers, I think, initially, it doesn't say it, but to special needs youngsters, or special needs, but that statement could be interpreted by the school committee to mean precisely what we're talking about in cases where the superintendent or his assigned person says, yes, we're going to inter-district you because your mom and dad want you to, and we have that in. In other words, I would not suggest we have to change the regional agreement. That in fact, that statement we could all review and say, that kind of covers what we're talking about. The other thing, maybe we've gotten away from it, but I think Scott alluded to not one of the priorities, but the slight benefit, we don't have too many, of a mother or dad who teaches here in the district whose son or daughter they want her or him to come to the 3rd grade or the 4th grade. I strongly agree, without any priority, that continues, because we've all had a little taste of negotiations over the years, and it's one simple thing that we can do for staff that they never would ask unless it was an important thing. So I think, however, we note that it's in there, either because we understand it or we institutionalize it by a statement, but I agree. I think that should continue.
Thank you. Scott?
In the suburbs where we didn't have school choice, it was codified in our contracts with the teachers. So, in an area where you have school choice, I do think it's very important to have it in there as before you go to the lottery, you have this. It's a tremendously important thing in terms of retention of staff and staff morale. To have a staff member who's been with the district, has a kid, wants the kid to come to Monomoy, and then you say no, and then they have to go figure out, well, how am I going to drop my kid off? And the next thing you know, the staff member's leaving and going to another school district that's closer to daycare for them. And so again, it's an important thing for us that I think is good to go and just have in as a line. Last little point, I do think that that clarifying the sibling in the, as I refer to it, as the modern family type of sibling, that I think it's important to keep families together, and that families these days aren't just biological siblings. So I'd be inclusive in how the committee defines that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Sharon?
Yes, the very last thing on this mentions transportation is not provided for students attending another school region. Now, it seems to me like all of us are talking about trying to make it fine for kids from Chatham to go to Harwich and Harwich to Chatham, but I don't think we want to create another bus to have those in this case, they would be priority children. I think it could open a whole can of worms if we had to reschedule buses around a couple of kids from another town.
Okay, so item 8, I think she's talking about item 8, transportation, but that's, I'm not sure.
That's for another district.
That's part of the conversation? Yeah.
Or that.
But yeah, I understand what you're talking about. It's number 8, transportation is not provided for students attending another school district.
Because it says school district, and so that would have to change that, because if we didn't want Chatham and Harwich to get school busing to the other town, if they happen to be a first priority to come
Oh,
in
I
there,
see what you're saying.
which
Okay.
It sounds like we all like that idea, but this could create another mess on budget.
Why?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Terry?
I would suggest that we pause on that.
Yep.
And just all agree that, for part one of that youngsters can enter, and more than likely, it's so rare that the mother or dad in either town has already figured out how he or she would get that third grader to the other school. So I don't think it would need
Okay.
us to do it now.
Okay. So, all right, so it sounds like policy has our direction, because we had a consensus. I think we all agreed.
On the first page.
Yep. So I think that's it. That's it. All right, so this will go back to policy, which meets on Monday. Jackie, did you have something to add? Oh,
I'm adding it with my eyes through the superintendent who's going to drive my kid to school because he's worried about how people are going to get their kids to school to get to their
oh, I
jobs.
see, okay. So a little sidebar, okay. All right, so moving on
Here's an idea, don't have a kid.
to the next item under reports and discussions, continuing on to school choice. So this is just a little simple vote. School choice 2021-22. Do we want to participate or not? It's just a vote. Somebody wants to make the motion? Nancy?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve school choice for the 2021-2022 school year.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
And there, all right. Sharon is seconded. Any discussion? All right, so we're going to vote for this. In favor, Sharon?
Aye.
Thank you. Joe?
Osceola, aye.
Thank you. Joanne?
Aye.
Thank you. Jackie?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's unanimous. And the next item is the first reading of the 2021-22 school calendar, first draft, so we can take a look. And there were a couple of things just to point out. Let's see, so we have a kind of a staggered opening as usual, where it starts September 7th, and you can read in red there in September. So you've got a staggered opening, 7th, 9th, and 13th. And then the other thing that I was asked to note is the professional days are in yellow, but they might move around, but they're not going to increase. They might move around would be the only caveat there. But how does this, and the other thing too, I think our school committee meetings were listed as on some of these months, the 1st and the 3rd, because of various reasons.
Vacations.
Yeah, vacations and different things. So I don't know how you feel about that, because we typically meet on the 2nd and the 4th. Is that a big concern?
I like that Labor Day is back where it's supposed to be. Back in the beginning of the month.
Yes. Any comments? Sharon?
I just have a couple questions, and one is, trying to read this on October, it's clear to me that the 7th is a school committee, but the one after that, the 21st, has a line through it, which means
It's a half day of
half
school.
day of school.
Yeah, but we can still meet.
What's with that?
We can still meet. It's a half day for the schools, but it's still a meeting date for us, so it doesn't really affect it.
We'll just have
Okay.
half a meeting.
That wasn't clear. And then we don't have any July or August scheduled meetings, it looks like.
Oh, let me see. Hold on a second. Leah, is that your hand? Or you, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's something that as a committee you decide as it gets closer to the end of the school year.
Oh, yes.
What your summer schedule.
Thank you. So,
okay, thank you.
Yes, and this, yeah, did you hear that? So this is the school calendar. For our summer, we get to decide later on when we get closer if we want to have 1 or 2 July meetings or whatever we tend to discuss. This is just the school calendar. Any other questions, Meredith?
Dr. Carpenter, do we need to, is the before Labor Day teacher days, is that something that we can just, that's okay, or do we need to discuss that?
This follows the contract.
It does.
Yeah, so if we have school starting, the school itself opening, but the teacher days before is fine.
Perfect.
So in past, how about this? Last year, we had a Labor Day that was, this current year, school year, we had a Labor Day that I think was on the 7th, and we talked about moving. We actually had a presentation here, did a survey with parents and staff, and we moved the school year forward, and COVID moved us back. I preferred not to go through that effort this year, in part because I think we want to have a little more time to have COVID be in the rearview mirror as we go into the new school year. So, yeah, so this is the normal contractual late start, giving a Labor Day on the 6th.
Okay, thank you. And one other item that I was asked to share that's new to the calendar, on June 20th, you'll see Juneteenth, which is now a state holiday. It's now on the calendar as no school. So that is new for this calendar year. I'm sorry, well, for this calendar year. Yes, please.
So because it falls on a Saturday this year, it's a Saturday holiday. As it's a Sunday next year, it's recognized on Monday.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, questions? Everybody good? All right, so that's a first reading. So this will come back for approval, Leah? Okay, so this will come back for our next meeting for approval. Next item, reports and discussions, community forum to discuss our elementary schools. So I'm just publicly announcing again, March 4th, everybody in their packet has this. Joey has posted it to our regional district website. It's been mentioned in a couple of articles. It's on our website. We have the agenda ready to go. We're going to post it tomorrow, or Monday, tomorrow. We're going to post it tomorrow morning, so we already have the agenda written. We're going to have a brief, it's listed brief presentation. So about a 15-minute or 20 minutes of what brought us here, just kind of a little recap, talk quickly about the classroom sizes, and then we're going to go into the Q&A or the forum. Nancy?
Is it possible to have somebody or bring it to the attention of the two boards of selectmen for Monday and Tuesday meetings so that they're announcing it publicly at their meetings?
And actually,
got a thumbs up.
And actually they are. So thank you for reminding me. It has been mentioned at Harwich and it has been mentioned at Chatham, and they both got this in their packets. Yes, yes. Thank you. So that would be March, yes, March 1st and March 2nd. Jackie?
Did anyone reach out to Chatham 365 as well? They have a pretty good public.
Actually, Lindsay and I have had just a brief connection, and I'm actually going to follow up with her I know she's aware of it, I'm pretty certain, and I was just going to make sure that she spreads the word, which I think she's done already, but yeah. Anything else? Okay, so moving on to subcommittee reports, legislative liaison report. Just a quick recap. February 12th, as the legislative liaison, I attended the legislative breakfast hosted by the collaborative and I want to say MASC. I'm mixing my letters up. Mixing the letters up. So that happened on February 12th. Scott and I both went, and it was virtual this year, so it was all morning. And it was nice in the sense that we had a bit more interaction with Sarah Peak and Julian Sear. So we were put in a breakout room. Scott and I were there with other school committees and superintendents, and we had a really intimate conversation about mental health for our kids, and some of the challenges, not only during COVID, but just in general on the Cape. There's really a lack of mental health practitioners for adolescents. So we had a good conversation with Julian and Sarah. Julian in particular, because of his health background, was taking a lot of notes. And so there was a really good dialogue about that. Also another concern, people still very upset about the MCAS testing. There are people had strong feelings about that, so that was an opportunity to voice that. I had the opportunity to talk about our equity task force, and that was well received. I also mentioned about the 2019 graduation, where Scott invited the families up at the mic, some of our families of color, and that was also very well received. And Meredith will be happy that performing arts was also brought up at the legislative report. So our legislators had an opportunity to listen to how people felt about that. So it was a very good meeting. Very, very good meeting. Did you want to add anything? Okay. All right, so moving on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, just I'd like to thank the Mass Hire Cape and Islands Workforce Board for their grant in the amount of $2,000 for the high school. The Special Olympics for their grant in the amount of $500 for the Monomoy Regional High School Unified Strength and Conditioning. And Chatham resident Donna Lumpkin for her donation of trumpets and trumpet accessories to the Monomoy Regional Middle School Band Program. In terms of my COVID update, wouldn't it be nice if this was the last COVID update, people? But in terms of my COVID update, we unfortunately went and had to put out yet another notification to staff that we have had 3 positives at the middle school. All of those are students who have been out, so it's not impacting any in-person classrooms, but still it's COVID's still present and out there. In addition, our entire hockey team was identified as a close contact because of playing with an individual from another district's team, boys. So we have our hockey team at the high school quarantining. At the moment, we have some middle school classrooms that are quarantining. I think they're due back Monday, and then we should all be back in person, knock on wood. Of course, I always jinx myself every time I come here and give a report. The nice thing is that there has been a pretty continual decline in COVID new cases on Cape Cod. Finally, I was looking at the graphs that was released today. We're finally at a point where we're sort of equivalent to where the Cape was heading into November. Chatham, I just got an email from Dr. Duncanson that they, as a town, have finally gotten back into the green zone after weeks and weeks of being in the red zone. So we're in a lot better place than what we have been. I'm very thankful to the families that got tested after vacationing, and I think we're getting a lot of support and cooperation from our families about keeping students home when they're sick. So that's all going well. We are launching pooled testing on Monday. We were hoping to launch it this past Monday, only to find that the vendor who we're paired with for pooled testing didn't ship the materials to us. So I showed up to make a little video this past Saturday with some students and some staff over at Harwich Elementary School, but it was tough to do a video when you don't have the supplies, so we were on the phone with the vendor and they got us the supplies. So I put out we'll call it a lighthearted video to launch pooled testing that I've shared with the committee and all of our families and our staff. And I also had my same guest stars that were in that video help me, and it was largely 2 third graders that were demonstrating how pool testing happens, sort of the 6 steps pooled testing, and we put that out to staff this afternoon. So we'll launch that. Ideally, this will help us go intervene on cases that are asymptomatic and catch them before they become symptomatic and before they spread. So we have at the moment, I think, about 50% of our in-person students and a large number of our staff have filled out the consent forms, and they are welcome to join in over the next several weeks. I was told yesterday that the state has extended the grant for this through April 18th, so we'll have about 3 more weeks that we can do pooled testing, and I greatly appreciate all the efforts that Tony London and Joy Jordan have put in behind the scenes to make this happen. So we're trying to have this roll out where it's not an additional thing on our nurses who are already tapped out, but to bring it to the classrooms. And it's something that that students second grade and above can easily do from being involved as citizen scientists and helping stop this virus from spreading, and going through all of the steps on their own, much the same way that if you, as I've learned on a couple times now, go to CVS in Harwichport to do a COVID test, you're swabbing yourself, and our students for these pooled tests who are second grade and above will swab themselves, and our elementary school nurses will help facilitate preschool, kindergarten, and first grade with the pooled testing. So we'll be the only school district on the Cape that's launching into this endeavor, and there are a couple others that have been reaching out, just wanting some suggestions on how to do it. So they've all gotten the videos too. So
The videos.
they're probably wondering about the state of the mind frame of the school superintendent with the trailer. So anyway, that's it for me.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? All right, seeing none, we are down to action items. We've already voted. Declaration of surplus. Could I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Nancy, thank you.
I move to declare surplus the items listed in our packet.
Oh, okay. And, all right, so Meredith has, Nancy made the motion, Meredith has seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll start in the Zoom room to vote to support this surplus. Sharon? And are you on mute, Sharon?
Oh, I didn't hear you. Aye.
Oh, thank you. Joe?
Osceola, aye.
Thank you. Joanne? And you are off mute, Joanne, so I think we can hear you. Can you hear us, Joe?
Aye.
Okay.
I can't hear you, but that's all right.
So you're randomly voting. Okay. Jackie? That's okay. Jackie?
Aye.
Thank you. Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's unanimous. And the presentation of warrants has been made. And could I could entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Nancy?
I would second it.
And Terry is seconded. We'll go into the Zoom room. This is for a motion to adjourn, starting with Sharon.
Aye.
Thank you. Joe?
Aye.
Joanne?
Aye.
Thank you. Jackie?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and we are adjourned at 9:04. Thank you, everyone. We will see you on March 11th.